Mark, totally different background, I guess, becoming a winemaker. Tell me a little bit about your background and why you chose to become a winemaker.
Well, it's very similar to the background that Jack stated. I walked into a winery, I graduated college, I wanted to be an English teacher all my life. I studied literature, and I got a master's degree in literature from State University of New York at Stony Brook, and wanted to teach English, and applied for my first job, and I found out my first job wouldn't even pay my rent.
Okay.
So I walked into one of the wineries that was just starting up on the east end of Long Island, Pindar Vineyards. It was very small, and I had a little bit of background in chemistry and biology in school, and it was fairly simple. Winemaking is a fairly simple process and a minute scale, and I stayed and I liked it, and I worked my way up in the industry, just as Jack did as a chef.
Now, Jack had to contend with you know, the French cuisine, the classical cuisine. Is there a classical style of winemaking that you had to learn?
Sure, there's a classical style of winemaking. Similar to food and you know, food as a regional product, wine is also a regional product because grapes grow very differently in different areas of the world. And when Long Island started as a winemaking, wine growing industry, we had a big background in agriculture. The east end of Long Island still has a big background in agriculture. And people would commonly ask, well, what kind of, let's say, for instance, Chardonnay are you going to make? Are you going to make a French-style Chardonnay, or are you going to make a California-style Chardonnay? And the simple answer is that we're going to make a Long Island-style Chardonnay, and that will develop over time, and over time we'll find out what makes that style of Chardonnay, whether we need more oak or less oak or different fruit maturation times and things like that. So,
now, how long have you been a winemaker?
I've been a winemaker 10 years.
So really the Long Island wine industry has basically, it's 10 years old, or a little bit older than that?
It just reached its 20th anniversary since the first European grapes were grown on Long Island, which is a short time. Although the wine industry in its growth really started taking off in the last 10 years and has only really come of age in the last probably 3 or 4 years.
Right. Now, basically, where Jack went to school, you kind of had on-the-job training. Was that rough? I mean, that's kind of, you know, you're bottling a year's crop basically, and if you go astray, you lose a year.
Yep. Yeah. It's my dad once told me when I first got into the wine industry. He said a winemaker is like a chef that bakes one cake a year, and really that's what you do. Although at different times we make. Pindar makes over 1 million bottles of wine a year, so we make many different types of wine, and not all ripen at the same time, not all bottled at the same time. So different wines are at different levels of their life. At any given time you may bottle, or it may need more aging. So, but it's a slow process. It's a slow learning curve in the industry because it takes about 5 years just before you kind of know all the different steps and when they take place.
Right. Now, you know, we have several bottles of wine here. Tell me a little bit. You're the winemaker. You're kind of the guy that gets either the credit or you know, get the bricks thrown at you.
Yeah.
How many in a typical wine operation? How many people are involved? You know, there must be a grower. There's an owner. There's a grower. They're usually all different people.
Yes, there are. We currently employ at Pindar Vineyards about 60 people, and that's with the winery staff and the vineyard staff and part of the marketing and sales staff, although we have a very small sales staff because our wine is sold through a distributor. But the largest portion of our staff is the vineyard crew, and that's the vineyard manager and assistant vineyard managers that actually grow the grapes. So that's where most of the work is done. You know, the wine is really made on the vine, right, essentially, and then once it comes to the winery, we just babysit it along.
Now, so as the winemaker, how aware are you of what's going on in the field? How do you, keep tabs on things? And is it different? Is it different for you going in, for instance, with a wine when you know the grapes are coming in and the weather conditions, the soil conditions that particular year? Do you have to be mindful of all those?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Like I said just a minute ago, the wine is really made on the vine, and most of my job is monitoring the grapes and making sure that the things that I think should be done are done to those grapevines before bud break, while they're dormant, which is the season now while we're pruning, and developing that style, we'd call it terroir, which is the balance between the what man can do to the wine or the grapes to make them better, the soil and the climate.
Now,
so.